It was a quiet, ordinary Tuesday at Prescott Industries. The usual hum of activity filled the large, open-plan office. Laptops clicked, phones rang, and the sound of typing echoed through the air. Workers sat hunched over their desks, focused on spreadsheets, emails, and meetings. The coffee machines hummed in the break room, dispensing endless cups to keep the workforce moving through their busy day. But amidst the frenzy of high-powered executives and fast-paced decision-making, there was one person no one seemed to notice. He was tucked away in the corner of the office, far from the main operations. Dressed in worn gray coveralls, his movements were slow, deliberate, and unnoticed. He was Sam, the janitor. No one paid much attention to Sam. To most of the employees at Prescott Industries, he was little more than a shadow, an invisible figure who came and went, cleaning up after them. He swept the floors, wiped down the desks, and emptied trash cans. Sam did his job with quiet precision, never speaking much to anyone, keeping to himself. If he did speak, it was always brief, just enough to get through the day. He knew his place in the hierarchy of the office, and he stuck to it. His role was simple: keep the office clean, stay out of the way, and go home. That was how it was supposed to be, and Sam had long accepted it. The employees, from the CEO to the interns, barely even acknowledged his presence. He was just the janitor, someone whose name, if anyone bothered to know it, would be forgotten the moment he left the room. But there was more to Sam than met the eye. While the rest of the office was absorbed in their own world, Sam watched. He observed everything: the way the executives spoke to one another, the way they carried themselves, the things they did behind closed doors. He listened when they talked in the hallways, exchanged quick words in passing, and made decisions that affected the company. Most importantly, Sam noticed the little things that others overlooked. The way a certain file was always out of place on the CEO's desk. The way some employees would slip out of the office early without anyone noticing. He had picked up on patterns, on small inconsistencies that no one else seemed to care about. As he mopped up the spilled coffee in the corner of the room, Sam's eyes flicked over the busy office. There were no grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was all so ordinary. The executives walked past him without a second glance. The interns huddled together, whispering about a big presentation they had that afternoon. In the break room, someone was brewing another pot of coffee, unaware that they had already spilled half of it on the floor. It was just another ordinary day, at least, that's what everyone thought. But Sam knew better. Behind the walls of Prescott Industries, behind the polished desks and shiny floors, something was wrong. And Sam, the unnoticed janitor, had stumbled upon something that no one else could see. Something that, if uncovered, could change everything. He wasn't just cleaning up the messes on the floor. He was cleaning up a much bigger mess, one that no one else seemed to notice. A mess that had been building up for years, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone to connect the dots. Sam had always been good at keeping secrets. He had learned that long ago, when life had forced him into the shadows. But this secret, this one was different. This wasn't just about keeping the office floors clean or avoiding the attention of the higher UPS. This was about something bigger, something that could bring the whole company to its knees. As he finished mopping the floor and turned to walk back to his cleaning cart, Sam paused for a moment. He looked down the hall at the rows of closed offices, each one filled with people who thought they were in control. They had power, they had money, and they had influence. But none of that mattered. Sam knew something they didn't. He had a secret. A secret that could ruin them all. Sam was no fool. He knew the risks. If he were to reveal what he knew, it could cost him everything. His job. His reputation. Maybe even his freedom. But at that moment, as the sun shone through the windows and the noise of the office continued around him, Sam made a decision. He wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Sam had spent years quietly moving through the halls of Prescott Industries, doing his job with a quiet efficiency that few ever noticed. Every morning, he arrived before anyone else, pushing his cleaning cart down the hall with the soft squeak of rubber wheels against the polished floor. It was always the same routine: mop the floors, wipe the surfaces, take out the trash. No one ever seemed to notice or care about him, and that suited Sam just fine. He didn't need the attention. He didn't want it. But it wasn't just the silence that bothered him. It was the way people treated him. Over the years, Sam had grown used to the snide remarks and dismissive glances that followed him wherever he went. He was just a janitor. That's how they saw him, how they all saw him. He had no title, no office, no status. Just a person who cleaned up the messes everyone else made. Sometimes, when he was busy scrubbing a table or vacuuming the hallway, he would overhear bits of conversation from the high-powered executives walking past. They never spoke to him directly, but their words often left a bitter taste in his mouth. The way they laughed, the way they discussed their latest business moves like they were the only ones who mattered, it was as if Sam didn't even exist. He was invisible. One afternoon, while cleaning the large conference room where the executives held their meetings, Sam felt the familiar sting of being looked down on. The room was nearly empty, save for a few employees working at their desks, typing away on their computers. The quiet hum of the office was interrupted only by the occasional ringing phone or the sound of someone walking down the hall. Marcus Thornton, the company's CFO, walked into the room with his usual confident swagger. Marcus was known for his sharp suits, his perfectly styled hair, and his quick wit. He had a reputation for being ruthless cutthroat in business and equally harsh with anyone he considered beneath him. Sam had seen it time and time again. Marcus would walk around the office, his eyes scanning the employees as if they were nothing more than tools for him to use. "Hey, Sam," Marcus called out as he strode toward the table. "You missed a spot over there." He pointed at a tiny speck of dust on the floor, barely noticeable. The words hung in the air, and Sam's heart sank. He knew what was coming next. Marcus wasn't just pointing out a mistake. He was taking pleasure in belittling him, in showing everyone in the room that he, Marcus, was in charge. The other employees who were gathered around the room snickered. A few of them glanced over at Sam, and he could feel their eyes on him, judging him. The laughter wasn't loud, but it was there, a quiet mockery that sent a wave of heat to Sam's cheeks. Sam stood up straight, his hands still holding the mop. He looked at Marcus, his face neutral. There was no hint of anger, no sign of frustration. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging the comment with the same indifference he'd grown used to over the years. "I'll take care of it, sir," Sam said softly. The room quieted, but the damage had already been done. Marcus had made his point. Sam wasn't important. He wasn't a part of the team. He wasn't even worth speaking to unless it was to point out a mistake. That was how it always was, and Sam had learned to live with it. He had always been the invisible one, the person who no one really saw. But what they didn't know was that Sam had a secret. A secret that, if revealed, could change everything. As he finished cleaning the small spot on the floor, he caught the glint of satisfaction in Marcus's eyes. The CFO turned and walked out of the room without another word, his sharp heels clicking against the tiles as he went. The employees who had been watching quickly went back to their work, pretending as if nothing had happened. Sam's hands tightened around the mop handle as he stood there alone in the room. His face was still unreadable, but inside, his mind was racing. This was the moment. The moment when he decided he wouldn't be invisible anymore. He would no longer be the janitor who cleaned up after everyone else. No longer would he be the one to accept the insults, the jokes, the mockery. Sam had been planning for this day for months. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. He had been watching, waiting, and now it was time to act. He had been quietly collecting information, small details, little hints, and he knew that Marcus, along with a few other key people at Prescott Industries, was involved in something much bigger than anyone realized. Something illegal. Something that could ruin the entire company. At that moment, as he stood in the middle of the conference room, Sam made a silent vow. He wasn't going to let Marcus, or anyone else, get away with what they were doing. He had the power to bring them down, and now he was going to use it. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Sam continued to do his job, quietly and without complaint, just as he always had. His routine didn't change. He was the janitor. He swept, he mopped, and he emptied the trash. But his mind was always working, always analyzing the things he heard and saw in the office. The whispers, the careless words dropped in hallways and meetings, the subtle mistakes that others overlooked. Sam paid attention to it all. It wasn't easy. Sam had to be patient. He couldn't act too quickly, couldn't make himself too obvious. He had spent years being invisible, and it was a skill he had perfected. People barely noticed him, and that was exactly how he needed it. No one would question the quiet janitor moving from one office to another. No one would care if he overheard a conversation in passing. No one would look twice at him as he went about his work. But Sam knew better than anyone else that silence was his greatest tool. He learned the rhythms of the office, the way the executives talked, the way they interacted with each other. Marcus, especially, was easy to track. He was loud, arrogant, and always seemed to have something to prove. Sam had overheard more than one conversation where Marcus bragged about the company's financials, boasting about how things were looking good on paper but never giving details. He always changed the subject when someone asked about the budget, dodging questions with a quick smile and a change of topic. But it was the small things Sam noticed that caught his attention. The way Marcus sometimes slipped into the office late at night, when the building was nearly empty. He wasn't working late, Sam could tell that much. He was doing something else. And the way the CFO seemed to leave the office at odd hours, never taking the usual route out, as if trying to avoid being seen. Sam's curiosity only deepened, and with each passing day, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. He had always known something was off at Prescott Industries. But now, he was certain. There were whispers about discrepancies in the company's financial records, and the more Sam listened, the more he realized that Marcus was at the center of it all. One evening, long after the office lights had dimmed and the last employee had left for the day, Sam made his move. The building was empty, save for a few security guards patrolling the halls. This was his chance. Under the guise of fixing a broken printer in one of the upper floors, Sam was able to sneak into the company's internal server room. It was a small, nondescript room tucked away behind a locked door. Only a few people in the entire company had access, and none of them had ever questioned why Sam was so familiar with the building. Years of cleaning, of being in and out of nearly every office, had given him an advantage that no one else realized. No one ever suspected the janitor. He slipped inside the room and set to work, pretending to fix the printer while he used his phone to hack into the server system. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp. It had taken months of preparation, but he had finally found an opening. Sam knew this was a dangerous game he was playing. If anyone caught him, it would be the end of his job and probably much worse. But he couldn't turn back now. Too much was at stake. After a few tense moments, Sam was able to bypass the security measures and access the company's financial records. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The files were a mess, numbers that didn't add up, suspicious transfers to unknown accounts, and fake audits that covered up large sums of missing money. Sam's heart raced as he began to dig deeper. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus had been siphoning funds out of the company for years, hiding it in shell accounts, and falsifying the books to cover his tracks. As Sam combed through the files, he discovered something else. Marcus wasn't just embezzling a small amount of money. He was taking millions. Tens of millions. The sheer scale of it was staggering. Sam felt a cold chill wash over him as the magnitude of the crime sank in. Prescott Industries, a company that prided itself on its success and reputation, was being systematically robbed from the inside. And no one had noticed. But Sam wasn't just looking at numbers. He was looking at the bigger picture. Marcus had carefully crafted a web of deceit, using fake audits and hidden accounts to cover up his tracks. The more Sam uncovered, the more he realized just how deep Marcus's scheme went. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, about manipulation, and about getting away with something that no one would ever suspect. Sam took screenshots of the files, saving them to his phone. He knew he couldn't take the physical documents, too risky. But the digital evidence, that he could use. It was enough to bring Marcus down, if Sam could play his cards right. As he left the server room that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just uncovered a dark secret that could destroy everything. Prescott Industries wasn't the shining beacon of success it appeared to be. It was built on lies, and the man at the heart of it all, the man who had manipulated and deceived everyone around him, was Marcus Thornton. Sam had been patient. He had waited, watched, and listened. Now, he had the proof. The pieces of the puzzle had come together, and he knew what he had to do. But he also knew the risks. If he moved too quickly, too carelessly, everything could fall apart. He had to be smart. He had to be careful. Sam returned to his cleaning duties the next day, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had uncovered. He couldn't talk to anyone about it, not yet. But soon, he would make his move. Soon, Marcus would pay for what he had done. And Sam would be the one to make sure of it. The morning of the annual shareholders' meeting had arrived, and the atmosphere at Prescott Industries was thick with excitement. The conference room was packed with investors, executives, and all the key players in the company. Each person took their seat around a long, sleek table, dressed in their finest business attire, their faces full of anticipation. Marcus Thornton sat at the head of the table, his posture perfect, his smile confident. He was the man everyone had come to listen to. He was the one who had built Prescott Industries into the powerhouse it was today. Or so he claimed. His sharp suit and polished demeanor made him the picture of success. He had the respect, the power, and the ear of everyone in that room. As the meeting began, Marcus spoke with authority, discussing the company's growth, the investments, and the quarterly profits. He rattled off numbers, explaining how well things were going, how strong the company was, and how it was poised for even greater success. No one questioned him. After all, he was Marcus Thornton, the CFO who had always delivered, who had always had the answers. But as Marcus spoke, a sense of tension lingered in the air, just beneath the surface. There was an undercurrent of nervous energy, a feeling that something wasn't quite right. No one could place it, but Sam had known for weeks now that the moment was coming. He had planned for this day, and he would not let it slip by. The meeting continued as normal, with Marcus at the helm, guiding the conversation in his usual, calculated manner. But then, without warning, the doors to the room opened. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone turned to look, expecting to see a late arrival. But instead, it was Sam who stepped into the room. Sam, who was never seen outside his janitor's coveralls, walked into the room wearing a crisp, dark suit. His hair was neatly combed, his face calm and composed. The transformation was startling. Gone was the invisible janitor. Gone was the quiet, unnoticed man who cleaned the floors and emptied the trash. This man was different. For a moment, the room fell into a stunned silence. No one knew what to make of it. Some people exchanged puzzled glances, while others whispered among themselves, wondering what this unexpected interruption was all about. Marcus's confident smile faltered for just a moment as he saw Sam standing at the front of the room. But he quickly regained his composure, his eyes narrowing. Sam was just the janitor, after all. What could he possibly have to say? Sam looked around the room, his eyes locking with a few key faces in the crowd. He could see the shock, the confusion, the curiosity in their eyes. He knew what they were thinking. Why is the janitor here? What does he want? He waited for the murmurs to die down before he spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Before this meeting continues, there's something everyone here needs to see." The room fell completely silent. Everyone was watching Sam now, waiting for him to explain. Marcus's expression had shifted from surprise to irritation. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sam raised a hand, signaling for him to remain quiet. Sam didn't need to say more. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a small remote, and clicked it. The lights in the room dimmed, and the large projector screen at the front of the room flickered to life. On it appeared a series of detailed financial records. At first, the room was confused. What was Sam doing? But then the images on the screen became clearer. Bank statements, internal financial reports, transaction logs, all of them pointed to the same thing: fraud. The numbers were meticulously detailed, showing how millions of dollars had been siphoned out of Prescott Industries and funneled into offshore accounts. There were records of fake audits, falsified transaction histories, and suspicious payments to unknown parties. Gasps filled the room. People sat up straighter in their chairs, their eyes glued to the screen, their disbelief growing with every new slide. Marcus tried to hide his discomfort, but it was impossible. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Sam continued to click through the pages, each one revealing more damning evidence of Marcus's embezzlement scheme. Sam didn't stop there. He moved to the front of the room, speaking directly to the investors and executives who were now hanging on his every word. "Marcus Thornton," Sam said, his voice steady and unwavering, "has been embezzling funds from this company for years. These records show just a small part of the scheme. He's been running money stolen from Prescott Industries, hidden in fake accounts, and laundered through fraudulent audits." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the room. "I've seen it all. I've been watching. And now, I have the proof." Sam took a step back and let the silence fill the room. The executives and investors exchanged looks, some stunned into speechlessness, others muttering under their breath. Marcus was no longer the confident, polished man he had been at the start of the meeting. His face had turned white. His hands were clenched in tight fists at his sides. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. "This is a mistake," Marcus said, but his words were weak, shaky. This isn't what you think. These records are, they're not real." Sam's lips curled into a slight smile. "I think you're the one who's mistaken, Marcus." He turned his attention back to the room. "The records are real. And they show exactly what's been happening at Prescott Industries under Marcus's watch." Before Marcus could respond, Sam pulled up one final document, a signed confession from an anonymous whistleblower, detailing Marcus's illegal activities in vivid detail. It was the final nail in the coffin. Marcus's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words failed him. He looked around the room, but no one was looking at him the way they had before. His power was slipping away, and he knew it. He had been caught. Just then, the door to the conference room opened again, and two security guards stepped inside. They didn't hesitate. They moved toward Marcus, their hands outstretched. "Marcus Thornton," one of the guards said, "you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The room was still. The security guards led Marcus out, his eyes wide, his body stiff with anger and humiliation. No one spoke. The investors, the executives, The employees, all of them, were left in stunned silence. Sam stood there, a calm figure in the midst of the chaos, his eyes fixed on the empty door where Marcus had just exited. The room had been turned upside down, and now, everything was different. Prescott Industries was no longer the company it had been just moments before. The truth had come to light, and Sam had been the one to reveal it. The air in the conference room was thick with disbelief, the aftermath of Sam's revelation still reverberating through the space. As the security guards escorted Marcus out of the room, his face pale and sweaty, every eye in the room was on him. There was a moment of stunned silence. The investors and executives sat in shock, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. The confident CFO, the man they trusted with the company's money, had been caught in the act, exposed for the fraud he had been running for years. It was hard to accept. As Marcus disappeared through the door, his head hung low in defeat, the tension in the room finally broke. Someone, perhaps it was a curious investor or one of the junior staff, finally spoke, breaking the silence that had descended like a heavy fog. Who are you?" the voice asked, its tone uncertain, as if unsure whether to ask such a question or to remain in shock. The question floated in the air, heavy with confusion and curiosity. The people in the room had watched Sam stand tall, exposing Marcus's crimes, but no one had ever truly known who Sam was. Sam's eyes swept over the room, his expression calm, almost peaceful. For a long moment, he didn't answer. He simply stood there, the weight of everything he had done and revealed settling into the room. The other faces in the room, wide-eyed and still processing the events unfolding around them, looked at Sam with a mixture of awe and confusion. Finally, Sam smiled faintly, the smallest glimmer of satisfaction tugging at the corner of his lips. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of quiet resolve. "Who am I?" Sam repeated the question softly, as if mulling it over. He looked around the room at all the faces, some still too stunned to react, others trying to comprehend what had just happened. "Just someone who was tired of cleaning up everyone else's messes," he said, his voice steady but carrying a depth of meaning. The room fell silent once more, as everyone tried to digest what Sam had just said. There was a long pause. Sam's words hung in the air, echoing in the room long after they were spoken. But there was something more to Sam than just being the janitor, the person who cleaned the office floors, took out the trash, and fixed the broken printers. People didn't realize it, but Sam had a history, one far different from the image that everyone had of him. He had been playing a part, hiding in plain sight. As the silence stretched on, the CEO, who had remained quiet through the chaos, his face pale from the shock of the events, finally spoke. His voice was tentative at first, but there was a clear respect in his tone now, something that had not been there before. I think we need to talk," the CEO said, his words slow, deliberate. "We need to discuss what happens next. I can't even begin to understand what you've done today. But I want to know more." Sam didn't respond immediately. He could feel the eyes of the entire room on him, the weight of their gaze pressing in. Some were curious, some still skeptical, and others were simply grateful to have witnessed a rare moment of justice. But Sam was calm, centered. He had been in control of the situation from the start. He looked at the CEO, his gaze steady and unfazed. "What happens next," he said slowly, "depends on you. But you should know, there's more to me than what you see." The CEO nodded slowly, then gestured for Sam to sit at the table, a sign of respect that hadn't been extended to him before. Sam walked to the chair at the end of the table and sat down, never breaking his calm demeanor. The room watched him, waiting for an explanation, for Sam to finally reveal the truth of his identity. "I wasn't always a janitor," Sam began, his voice quiet but clear. "A long time ago, I was a forensic accountant. I worked with companies, digging through numbers, finding the lies hidden beneath the surface. But my life didn't turn out the way I expected. I made mistakes, big ones. I found myself in trouble, in places I shouldn't have been. And so, I left that life behind. Sam paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I needed a fresh start. I didn't want anyone to know who I really was. So, I took the job here, working in the background, doing what I knew best, cleaning up after everyone else's messes. The room was still. The people who had once dismissed Sam as nothing more than a janitor now saw him in a different light. They understood, at least a little, the quiet power that Sam held. His skills had never been about cleaning floors, they had always been about cleaning up the dirt people couldn't or wouldn't see. And now, Sam continued, his tone growing firmer, I've seen enough. Prescott Industries deserves better than this. You deserve better than this. The CEO, now clearly aware of the caliber of the man before him, nodded thoughtfully. You're right, he said, looking around the room. We've let corruption thrive under our noses. But we'll change. We will. Sam nodded. There's one more thing. The room fell silent once again, the tension hanging in the air as everyone waited for what Sam would say next. I'll accept your offer, Sam said, his voice calm but resolute. But there's one condition. The CEO leaned forward, clearly eager to hear what Sam would demand. Anything, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Anything you want. Just tell us. I want you to create a fund for the employees Marcus exploited. For the ones he took advantage of. They deserve something. They've suffered in silence, and it's time someone made it right. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The employees who had been unfairly treated, who had suffered while Marcus reaped the rewards, were finally getting the attention they deserved. It was a small step, but it was a start. The CEO didn't hesitate. Done, he said immediately. We'll set up a fund to support those affected. I promise you, Sam, we will make things right. Sam stood up, the room watching him as he made his way to the door. He paused for a moment before he turned back to face them all. This company can be something good, he said, his words echoing in the silence. But it will take more than just one person to change it. It will take all of you. With that, Sam walked out of the room, leaving the stunned executives and investors behind. Prescott Industries was no longer the same company it had been when he walked in that day. And it would never be the same again. After the storm had passed, after the business world had been shaken and restructured, Sam returned to his quiet life. The bustling halls of Prescott Industries no longer echoed with his footsteps, no longer carried the sound of his mop swishing across the floor. No longer was he a shadow in the background, a silent observer, cleaning up the messes of others. He had done what no one expected, he had quietly and meticulously watched the threads of corruption unravel, pieced them together, and exposed them in front of those who never thought twice about the janitor who cleaned their offices. Sam's life, though now filled with respect and newfound purpose, remained simple. He chose to step away from the spotlight, as he had always done before. He didn't crave recognition or admiration, that was never his goal. He had done what he felt was right, and in doing so, he had proven something far more powerful than just the exposure of Marcus's scheme. The world around Sam had changed, but Sam himself had stayed the same. He didn't need fame. He didn't need accolades. He was content in the knowledge that he had made a real difference, not by wielding power or seeking revenge, but by using the skills and the patience he had honed over the years. He had built something far stronger than money or reputation, he had built trust. He had built respect. But as the world moved on, as new employees shuffled into Prescott Industries and old faces faded away, there was a lesson that lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed the transformation. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be the ones who clean up more than you ever imagined. These words stuck with the people who had once seen Sam only as the janitor. They didn't see the hidden potential, the wisdom in his eyes, or the quiet intelligence that had allowed him to outsmart the very system that had tried to overlook him. In their rush to dismiss him, they had missed something crucial. They had missed his strength. For too long, people had been taught to believe that power came from loud voices, from suits and ties, from bold declarations. But Sam had shown them the truth that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's patient. And sometimes, it's the ones who seem the least significant who hold the key to unraveling the biggest mysteries. In the weeks and months that followed, the employees of Prescott Industries found themselves walking a little taller. They no longer looked at the quiet janitor with the same dismissive eyes. They knew the truth now. Sam was not just someone who cleaned their messes, he had cleaned up something much bigger than that. The company itself, now reshaped by the honesty and transparency Sam had brought, began to thrive once more. The fund for the exploited employees was established, and the culture shifted. The leaders who had once disregarded the quiet workers now sought their advice, aware that the answers to their problems might be found in the most unexpected places. They began to value the patience and wisdom that Sam had demonstrated. But for Sam, life returned to its simple rhythm. He didn't seek out the praise or the public recognition. He returned to his small apartment, where he could read his books, watch the rain fall outside, and reflect on the journey he had taken. The world had changed because of his actions, but his heart remained unchanged. Sam knew that true strength wasn't in loud actions or attention-grabbing moves. True strength was in knowing when to act, when to stand up, and when to quietly walk away. It was in understanding that the most profound change could come from the most unexpected sources, from those who had been underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. And so, as the months turned into years, Sam continued to live his quiet life, knowing that the ripples of his actions would continue to affect the world in ways he couldn't even see. Every small act of integrity, every quiet choice to stand by what was right, carried weight. His story, though seemingly ordinary, had shown everyone that the true measure of a person wasn't in their title or their appearance, it was in their character. It was in the courage to stand alone when no one else would. The company moved forward. New leaders emerged, and old habits faded away. But Sam's lesson remained, like a shadow that never left. And that lesson, simple yet powerful, lived on in the hearts of those who had witnessed his quiet revolution. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be the ones who clean up more than you ever imagined.